Friends, my guest today is Matthew Prempeh, current Education Minister of Ghana. Matthew brings a rich tapestry of experiences to this discussion. He studied medicine and human biology. He worked as a medical doctor in Ghana and the UK. In the private sector, he built operations in the areas of security, communications, and energy. He also served as a member of parliament across a number of sectors. Now, a rare tri-sector leader, Matthew was recently selected as the 2020 recipient of the Harvard Ministerial Medal of Achievement in recognition for his work towards strengthening public education in Ghana. Please enjoy my conversation with Matthew Prempeh. Well, Matthew, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here at Luminos. We're thrilled to have you as an incredibly experienced and successful education minister in Ghana. As you know, we're exploring this question of how leaders might navigate through crisis, given that we're in the midst of an incredible and unprecedented global crisis in the COVID-19 pandemic. So to begin the conversation, we'd love to go back to your childhood, Matthew. Tell us a little bit about how you grew up, and tell us how education helped inform and shape your vision and your hopes for who you would become as an adult.
Thank you. I was born in Kumasi, the second city in Ghana, where the King of Ashanti resides. And I was born in a chief's palace, virtually, my father being a chief. So I grew up in we call it in Ghana, a compound house, a house with many rooms, with many people. At the time, over 150 people, between 150 and 150, coming in and going depending upon what is happening. So that's where I grew up. It's an inner city place, but my family is very well educated. When you consider that one of my granduncles has risen to become the president of the country, who also was born in that same house and lived in that same house. So we were born into this inner city, urban compound house, where there's certain values, traditional values and customs and culture, as well as modern values were simultaneously instilled in us. So whereas we were told to respect the elderly and respected no matter what, you don't speak back. At the same time, you're expected to excel in classroom, critically thinking and examining everything you have been told. So I was raised by my paternal grandmother and my paternal great-grandmother, because at the long part of my growing up, my father was also still in school in the UK. So that's how I was growing up. And my mother happened to live in the same house of my father. So that is where I started the basic school. I went to a nursery school, but I went to a primary school, and I went to a secondary school, all in Kumasi. Very good schools, quasi-private, virtually. My secondary school was in a public school, but one of the best public schools in the country. From there, I proceeded to do my medical training, again in Kumasi, because they had one of the best medical schools, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. So that is how I grew up. Because it was an inner city area, we have all manner of people from all diverse backgrounds in the same community where I live. So you walk out of the house, which is Ashanti speaking, and you cross the road and you go into the Hausa or the Zongo community. The Zongo community, just a street. Zongo community have all types of people. They are Gans, they are Evers, they are. So I grew up amidst people from a diverse background. Grew up for people with a taste of diverse religions. There's the Muslims, there was the African traditional religion, there was Christianity all around me in the same house. The chief I was named after at a point in time was a Muslim. So my family is a strong Christian family. And yet, because of the traditional role my father had as a chief, he had this traditional African ancestry to pay homage to as well. So tolerance and diversity of opinion, of people, I grew up with. And in all that, I was brought up to respect fellow human beings and respect the elderly and show courtesies to all manner of people. In fact, I remember growing up and being told that when you have a big head, you don't have to frown on your face. Put everything in there and digest it. Don't walk out angry and sad. So growing up was a huge challenge because I was exposed to everything. In those inner city neighborhoods were pure dropouts who were on either drugs or something, and those who were a bit affluent at the same time. So you had to dedicate being careful about where you passed playing, because you go and pass through a neighborhood and you might get beaten or you might get stolen from. So we had to use our gumption, they used to call it, very early in life. And my grandmother, who had a wonderful, terrific life, who was married to the King of Ashanti, was so much into education. She's still alive, 90-something plus. And she's a recorder of the family history and the events and everything. Even though she stopped school very early to go and marry the King of Ashanti, he insisted, he laid down the rules and regulations for everybody in the family. Everybody lived with her because she was living in the King's Palace, so who doesn't like to live there? And she made sure that education was something that preoccupied my everything. Because I remember growing up and went to the same primary school as my dad. And she kept my dad's results, terminal results and everything. And when my results came, she just went to take my dad's own and said, oh, when your dad was your age, this was his results, look at yours. So the challenges on me were huge. But it also meant that I had to live up to a certain expectations from the day one. It was inculcated into me that there are expectations you meet. You are the first of your father, and you have to set the mark for the rest of the family. You don't have to disappoint your father. You don't have to disappoint the family. You have to keep the family name flying. And so the expectations were huge. And it molded me. It made me sure that in school I did well. Looking back, if it was now that I was in school, I would have been labeled as having attention deficit disorder. Probably not because of that, but because probably what I learned in school was far less than what I learned at home. So I was far above my school age cohort than probably I was aware, because I hardly brought homework home, because I did it in school before I left home, except maybe if it's an essay or something. So I had to read a story every night before I was allowed to sleep. My book of Bible stories, because my grandmother was into church. I had to read a chapter every time and tell her the story. I remember reading the Ladybird books. What was the name? And the Blyton books, Famous Five, Secret Seven, and a 200-page book. As early as 4-year class 4, I could read it in a day. Because I had to have a ferocious appetite to read, because I had to go and borrow from friends. So you borrow and in a book in a week, and you have to take it back again, another one. Because they were very exciting stories. The Ladybird, the Cinderella stories, and everything. And my grandmother happened to be a fantastic storyteller. So if I didn't read the book and explain and tell the story to her, she ended up telling me a lot of folklore, bringing me up with a lot of folklore stories. So that is how I grew up, and very, very challenging. I saw myself as privileged, but had to work for everything to make a name myself. So that is how I got through up to medical school without a hitch, without failing anywhere. So that has been my rise to medicine. I finished medical school, and I did a postgraduate in clinical epidemiology in Holland, courtesy of a Dutch government scholarship. And after that, I went to UK to work as a doctor and get a professional qualification in surgery. And I came back. Along the line in university, I took on the role of politics, because politics is also part of one of the things in the family. When we write the history of politics in Ghana, my family cannot be left out. My paternal family cannot be left out. they have participated in the formation of parties and funded parties partly and things like that. Such that my granduncle became president, the second president of the Fourth Republic, President Kufuor. So the politics was also there. And I loved it. And I loved all the hula baloo of politics and rallies and things like that. So when I got to university, one of the things I decided very early that university education is not about what you're going to do in future. It's about making the social relations you need for the future. So I got into that social activism path. I was for 2 years the local NUCS chapter president, as a member of the Ashanti Students Union, rising to become president, national president. I was the general secretary of the Medical Students Association. In my second year of medical school, I contested and won an election. So I was very, very active politically. Then along the line, Ghana transformed from being a military dictatorship to constitutional democratic rule. And we quickly formed what I would say a center-right party group in our university, and I became the leader. So we sent people around to campaign for our first presidential candidate, though we lost the election. Medical students traveling around the country got signed in the middle of the night, sending resources to people, university students all over the place. So I got baptized into politics very, very early, from local politics in the university, students' politics, student activism, graduating to political students, political partisan students. Then I had to leave, and I came back from UK in 2003, wanting to contest for a parliamentary seat in 2004. At the last minute, I was told to drop for a better, probably lady candidate. So I had to, again, listening to the elders, I had to abandon. And in 2008, the opportunity came for me to grab a seat. And the rest, as they say, is history. I've been a member of parliament since then. And for 2 terms, I was in the opposition. And my party came to power in 2016, and I was honored by the president as a Minister of Education. So that has been the journey, and that has helped shape the secondary school I attended. Was a boarding school. In Ghana, secondary education is boarding education. Over 65% of our students elect to go to boarding school. And in my boarding school, because it happened to be an elite boarding school, and our boarding system doesn't say that it's only the catchment area of where it's situated. Everybody from the whole across Ghana can apply, and based upon merit can get into that school. So the people in my secondary school were from diverse parts of Ghana. Most of them didn't speak the language that I understood. So we had to forge a family that we all spoke English. By the time we finished, they all spoke my local language though, but we didn't know where each other came from. We didn't know which part. And I can say that the boarding system in this country called Ghana has helped unite us and become an oasis of peace in the sub-region that has been melting for some time. Because when we grew up, the old boyism and the old girlism, the old students association, were more powerful than our tribal or ethnic links. And it has helped Ghana. And so those are the things that have shaped me to be what I am.
So that's a wonderful story, and thank you for taking us all the way through from your childhood to becoming minister and the various things that shaped you. So clearly, if we run through your history, you've studied medicine and human biology, worked as a medical doctor in Ghana and the UK. You have experience in the security, communications, energy sectors. You've served in parliament in numerous sectors. You've been minister. So clearly, you're a person with a highly cross-sectoral experience. You talked about growing up in the community, in the household of 150 people, and the different languages and religions. How have all of those experiences shaped your vision and your view of education and also leadership?
I think growing up in the Chief's Palace, you are tutored from day one to be a responsible adult. values are put in you, are inculcated in you that are lifelong values. Respect, tolerance, being your brother's keeper, applying yourself diligently, working hard to become successful in life, not living on handouts, fending for yourself, making a good name, continue the family's reputation. So those are inculcated from you, and you are expected to excel in school. They don't take second in the class or third in the class with presents. They tell you that you could have been better. So because all around me were elderly people, uncles and aunties, who almost everybody has a master's degree. Some had their PhD, some were professors when I was growing up. So your medical degree is very, very little to them in their scheme of things. They just continue to push you on, tell you to read, tell you to travel, help you to read, help you to travel, because traveling broadens your horizon. Traveling, reading broadens your horizon. So those are the push factors that they expected me. So when I came back in 2003 to settle, and the whole point was to get into politics, and I couldn't go into politics. I had to find things to do. I couldn't go back into medicine, even though I could have, because I thought it would just have been a short while when I got back into politics, and a real waste of my talent. So I said, let me get to do other things. And hopefully let me excel in those other things so that I know that my learning process is continuing. Because I believe in lifelong learning, and I've learned all, and I still do learn. So I believe in life. I believe in lifelong skill training. Even when I was going to the university, I had a feeling that I might not end up practicing medicine for the rest of my life. I might get into something. So everything I did was to make me able to learn, unlearn, relearn, get skills, throw away those skills, reskill myself, and prepare myself. So preparing myself was making my hands and my mind active. And that's why I got into security, communication, and energy, because I had to survive. I was never going to work back in the government hospital. So I set up a firm that was into security, that was into communication, that was into energy. And I did represent a lot of companies. I still have the firm somewhere, even though I'm totally out of it. Still working in the energy sector, still working in the communication sector, still working in the security sector. But that also was another chapter of my life. And wow, to become successful in private business is not a joke. The hurdles you have to climb. But I was fortunate enough to get a helping hand to scale that effortlessly. And it prepared me, it opened my eyes and my mind to things that are more exciting than medicine as well. The communication sector now is the leading sector even in technology. The security sector is about really thinking about human values in a different way. Human security, personal security, and others. And the various forms of security that we tend to forget. And the energy sector, energy is life. We needed electricity to power our economic growth. And getting into that, knowing how they are operating, knowing how substations are built, knowing how transmission wires are laid and things like that. And the other applications that these things could endure to the benefit of us. So, but all in all, those were still preparatory grounds for me to get into politics, formal politics. So even though I did it with a passion and I did very well in those sectors, I was just waiting for the opportunity to say, hey, I'm gone. And that opportunity came in 2008 when the vacancy occurred just where I was, because another uncle of mine was a member of parliament. Another grand uncle was a member of parliament in this area. He was also a medical doctor. He had excelled in politics. He had become a minister for defense, minister for interior, held both positions even at that time, and had retired. So I went in and contested that seat and I won. So even in that seat, I had a huge expectation to deliver. People have seen my uncle done tremendous things for the community. And there was somebody coming and saying, hey, I want to come and wear his shoes, big size shoes. But I think thanks be to God, I am the Christian faith, and I think that I've succeeded largely in that area. And I became a minister. So it's an amalgamation of all these experiences, living through a situation where you see people who have nothing, literally nothing, who will come to your house and beg for food. And at the same time, people who have it in abundance and being brought up to still respect both, to honor both. That in my house, madmen could pass and come in, and my great-grandmother would give them food. And I never understood it. One day, she had to sit me down and say, you have to respect the madman, because it's something that I don't want any in my family. So when they come in, I hope when you see them, you all see that you don't want to become like a madman. So everything was a learning experience with the family. Everything was a learning experience in the family. So when I got into politics, I think I needed to apply myself. And I got in a very odd way, like you're saying, education. But really, ministerial jobs are leadership positions. You grow into it, and you excel if you can apply yourself diligently and remain focused. So when I got the job, actually since 2013, my president had indicated to me that if he had gotten the job in 2013, 2012, this is where he would have put me anyway. So I kind of prepared myself quietly for the intervening 4 years. And when I got the job, we had been put in, and my manifesto had been done by serious educationists, people who have lived all their life around education. And there was me trying to take what they had read, the platform they had fought the election on, to run with it and implement it. So I kept the team around for advice purposes. And I still, even today, as I speak to you, they came to give me a presentation on how we are going to reopen schools and what we have to look at. So I've stood on the neck of giants. My bit is to offer the leadership, the political will, the perseverance, the persistence, the focus, the bringing and making sure the team that I've put together works for the purpose for which we have provided the resources for the technical people to work. And I benefited greatly from the Harvard ministerial education, because there I met a group of ministers who shared their experiences with me. And in life, if you get people who share their experiences with you, you are bound to succeed. That is, provided you think through it and regurgitate it and really go through it well. So I had all these wonderful friends in Harvard who really opened my eye. Before Harvard, before the Graduate School of Education ministerial group, I had been attending leadership in the leadership courses in the Kennedy School of Government. I'd attended a lot of them. So that had gone on in my preparation when I was in the position in Parliament. So every course that leadership in crisis, leadership in conflict, leadership for the 21st century, behavioral aspects of decision making, I devoured everything. I studied and learned till I got into the ministerial group. And then I shared real life experiences with most people. And so I got the best preparation for the job. Medicine had taught me empathy, if nothing. But the job had given me, that program had given me people who have been there and were talking to me. And so, I have benefited.
Sorry, yeah. So what would you say is your vision for education in Ghana today?
Simply put, I want Ghana to be a learning nation. And I want my ministry to be a learning ministry. That's simple. And I mean lifelong learning. For those who are being formally educated, I want them to come up with the best learning outcomes possible. But more importantly, for life, I want Ghana to be a learning nation. A nation that reads, a nation that devours knowledge from all over the world and applies knowledge for the betterment of the society. That is my vision. But my vision as a minister doesn't matter much because I serve within His Excellency the President's vision. Fortunately, his vision has been about education, skill training, and education. Had it not been him, we wouldn't have achieved anything we have done in education. So I have a big man who is driving, because he told me that he wants to be remembered for what he has done in the educational field, but I must go and implement it. So I work for somebody who believes in education. I grew up with people who believed in education. I work for somebody who says we have to get this done. And going to the Harvard ministerial experience and sitting around my desk, I've had a wonderful time. My team has been excellent. But the knowledge for the selection of the team came from the Harvard ministerial experience. My stakeholder engagements have come from my lessons I learned at Harvard. So I have been thoroughly prepared. So people ask, you come from no part in education, how have you been successful? I've been successful because of the company I keep. And that company is full of educationists, hardworking technocrats, and I'm just providing the leadership that they need to make it happen. And I thank God it's happening.
So Ghana clearly has had a journey from independence until now, and education has evolved over the course of time. I wonder perhaps if you could take us through some of that history and perhaps point to some of the critical crisis moments that you think the country experienced and how leaders before you helped navigate the system to where it is today.
Ghana got out of colonialism, one of the first country in sub-Saharan Africa to get through the shackles of colonialism. And our first president had made a remarkable impact on education, building schools, secondary schools all over, making sure that Ghana was on the right trajectory to education. But they got caught up in socialism and communism and it withered. So we've had different experiences. In the early 70s, we experimented with the junior high school system, breaking our educational system between secondary boarding and A-level sixth form boarding. So we started the experimenting of the junior high school way back in the early 70s. But that also became a big issue that changed the whole of our educational setup in the 80s and 90s, when we formally separated it into junior high school and senior high school. And junior high school became a day school, and it broke from our pattern of our secondary education being boarding education. That has had serious impact today. It has made us see ourselves more differently than previously, but we saw ourselves more as one unit. Because now we stayed in secondary school, senior secondary school for only 3 years. That it has destroyed our sports virtually in this country. Because in the 7 years that we were in secondary school, everybody got a chance to play in a sport or something, between schools, among schools, and everything. Now it's only 3 years. So the system is only preparing the child to pass the next exam to go. So we have lost things out of that. But also associated with that is the learning crisis we've gone through. In the 80s, when we went through the economic crisis, learning got affected. Learning got affected because education is a social project. It doesn't earn money, neither does it bring instant rewards. So in economic deprivation, it gets affected most. So we got so much affected that we started lack of teachers, lack of textbooks, a shift system, that people went in the morning, some went into the afternoon. We've gone through all those crises, multiple crises. But consistent crisis we've lived through chronic is a decline in learning outcomes. In all these economic problems that we are having and the social crisis that we are having, what has been consistent is the gradual decline in our learning outcomes. To the extent that in 2016, the National Education Assessment said only 11% of our primary 6 pupils passed mathematics. Between 2013 and 2015, our early grade math assessment and our early grade English assessment was telling us only, for all primary 2 people, only 2% could read fluently and understand comprehension at their level. So the crisis had gotten to the bottleneck, such that we were part of PISA, and we came last in PISA, I think, in 2015. And what the leaders did at that time was not to put in the structures to change course, but rather to leave PISA, as if PISA is the cause of our problems, not the educational decline that are consistent. When you draw the graph, it's consistent, 45 degrees coming down. So we hit the bottom line. So when I became the minister, there was a crisis everywhere. Crisis in learning outcomes, crisis in the budget supporting education, everything. School didn't have textbooks, school didn't have chalk for even teachers to teach. So there was a huge problem. For 4 years, graduate teachers were not employed. For those who were employed, who were diplomate students, they got teaching for 2-3 years and paid only 3 months' salary. So there was a crisis everywhere. Without the teacher, there is no education. And the teacher front had broken, their allowances had been stopped, their research funds had been cancelled, their benefits of bringing in cars into the country, duty-free, had been stopped. So there was a crisis on the teacher front, there was a crisis on the students front. So in all this, the well of those who could afford, the elite, ran away from the public system in the basic schools. And their friends started setting up private schools. So whereas it was difficult to get primary schools, private primary schools where we were growing up, now they were teaching, say, about 30% of the population. But those are the times that only those who could afford. And interestingly, teachers that were teaching in public schools, they did not take their children to those same public schools. They took their children to private schools. So there was a crisis in education. Teacher absenteeism was huge and high. Some put it nearly 30%. So there was a need. We already bottomed, so I didn't have the option. The only thing I decided was to behave like an ostrich and pretend everything was hunky-dory and sit your way throughout. Because the statistics was also dire. For leaders in education, their average tenure was less than 2 years. Between 2001, January, and 2016, December, 16 years solid calendar years. There had been 8 educational ministers spanning 2 political divides. From 2000 to 2008, there was a political party in office, 2 terms. 2009 to 2016, there was a political party terms. For both of political parties, for 16 years, they changed the education minister every 2 years. Some lasted for months. Some lasted for 4 years, but averagely 2 years. So I came into the thinking that, hey, 2 years I'll be gone. So everything you have to achieve, I have to achieve it in those 2 years. With these stark and dark statistics that we have, I cannot pick and choose where to start from. So I should plunge and do a total transformation, radical transformation. Hope that I can do something within 2 years. Because you can't only pick the teacher and leave the student. You can't only pick the student and leave the supporting staff. That makes it work. The parent. So I decided, again, a bit of enlightenment from Harvard Ministerial Group program. My work was cut out. Engagement of the teacher unions, engagement of other stakeholders, but more importantly, having a vision and staying with the vision. And the vision was a vision of transformation to make Ghana a learning nation. So no stone was going to be untouched. Our manifesto platform had been fantastic. So I just decided to translate the manifesto targets into implementable actions and make sure that within 2 years, I succeed in all that, because there's an election cycle that after 2 years in office, everything becomes political. Very, very terribly partisan.
So how do you take the manifesto into implementation in the course of 2 years? Clearly, you can't do this by yourself. You need an effective team around you, and you need to have everybody focused on the same goal. So tell us a little bit about how you worked to build the team that you needed to make this transition.
Thank you, Mabusa. During the transition period, really during the period of accountability, when the government changed, between January when we took office and probably March, we went to what we call a transition team, where the previous administration had handed over to an administrator general. That administrator general had handed the books over to us, and the team had sat down to peruse the books. And it was during that process that it hit me hard that the work we need to do needed like an extraordinary team. So those who had written my manifesto full of educationists or seasoned educationists all around the team, and everybody was saying, if you can do it, if you can do it. Those who knew me a bit said, only you can do it. So I had to put on the hard work. But the technical group that I met in the ministry were extraordinary. Just last night, I was praising the chief director of the ministry. He had come from the financial background. So policy writing and analysis came secondary to him. What we did was to put a team under him of technical staff. I was there to provide the political leadership and make the hard decisions and give them the resources to work. By the time we finished transition, I can put it on record, that we had 45 policy documents already for us to take to cabinet. And recently, the cabinet secretary had honored me with a plaque for being the most voracious abusers of their time, probably bringing the policy every other week. But the elements, the seeds, were sowed during the transition time. That is why I say that if anybody deserves credit, it's the technical staff that I work with. They translated the manifesto into policy. Policy in this country has been approved by cabinet. And going into cabinet and going through the cabinet process and convincing the mates in cabinet has been a most difficult job for me in my life. Putting everybody on board behind the agenda of the president and making sure we succeed. It means that I had personally had to get on top of the issues because the president was not going to allow people to come and speak to him. He had to put me there, and I was the interlocutor for education. So everything education, he would call me. 1 a.m., he would call me. So it means that my learning curve was steep. So we put together a fantastic team. But I came to meet the team. And that is why I believe that leadership matters. The team were there. They needed the leader to put them to the right use. And that is what I did. And then I had the benefit of, just after the transition team, going to the Harvard Ministerial Program. So the reinforcements were there. So we came and polished this policy document out of the manifesto. And I got noted for in cabinet that when somebody speaks, I said, my manifesto page, this asked me to do that. Then the president will open. Then the question is answered because that was the manifesto you ran on. So we did a total transformation on teachers, on teacher education and teacher reform. We did on curricula. We did on school management and leadership. We did it on aspiration for students in school. And our single biggest issue was providing access for free secondary education, which we also did. We accomplished that in 8 months. And the rest, they say, is history. So it is because of the team that I've had. The selection of the team has been deliberate. The reliance of the technical staff to work towards the leadership ambition that we had has been phenomenal in my ministry.
So one of the challenges that education ministers will speak about is getting access to funding to support your manifesto and your vision. And part of that, you talk about bringing your ideas to government. Part of that is negotiating the dynamics between the cabinet, but also you've got to make sure that the finance minister is on your side, and clearly you've got to work at the pleasure of the president. So tell us a little bit about of course, there are also the international funders as well that you've got to work into the puzzle in most countries. So tell us a little bit about how you navigated the financial dynamics of putting your plan together.
I'll use the example of the Free Senior High School, which we all knew was going to cost us an arm and a leg. The president made a decree that all our oil wealth, the first charge of the oil wealth was funding free senior secondary education, including technical and vocational at that point. So that decision was made by the president. So the budget for the Free Senior High School resided with the president. It didn't reside with the Ministry of Education. We just managed the Free Senior High School on behalf of His Excellency the President. Had we not taken that decision, that I doubt whether finance would have helped us. Because, you know, they are looking at different things. The president always insisted and always made sure, and he was the #1 advocate for funding for education, and especially the free secondary school. In fact, that budget went through the office of the president. We just managed it here. So I've seen the Ministry of Finance try as hard as they can to separate it and bring it to Education Ministry so that probably they can kill it quick. But I have resisted that one. I said, the president deal with that issue. It's not me. I would do the mathematics. I would do the everything and present it. Like this year's, the budget for next year. We've sat down, we've worked at it. I just took it to the office of the president. They have to take it to the finance ministry. And if the finance ministry decides to cut off the office of the president, hey, who am I? But so, even though we collaborate very, very, very well, the instinct on finance ministry is spending cut, spending cut, spending cut. But when you look at something like the educational sector plan for 2018 to 2030 that we did, it means that we have here a steady increase in support besides senior high school funding in education, which we are getting it reluctantly, pulling the teeth, but we are still getting it because we make that advocacy very, very strongly, very, very passionately. We see anybody's attempt to subject us to cuts as an undermining the platform for which we run our election on. So it has not been easy, but yes, we have had to negotiate. And the other cabinet members have been fantastic supporters of our agenda in education, our agenda in infrastructure development, our agenda in agri. So everybody knows that if we want to be a nation that is moving socioeconomically, there's a need to train people and develop the people's talent and skills. There's a need to educate the people. We had only about 3% of the population going through tertiary education. And we cannot stay there. We have to tremendously move that up. We bring in free senior high school students through the board meant that the 100,000 pupil wastage every year for the last 10 years that we came to inherit. 100,000 students who are qualified to go to secondary school who couldn't go because of fees, financial encumbrance. Now they could go. We stopped the decay of 22% of those who were in school who fell out. So you say you work for out-of-school children. Imagine working so hard and putting 100 people in school, and in 3 years, 22% fall out. And nothing is being done. But at least bringing the free senior high school scholarship package, the students have stayed in school. They haven't fallen out. Those who have passed their exams have been placed in institutions. We've supported the teachers. We've provided the textbooks. We've provided the school uniforms. We've provided the food. Even for day students, we give 1 hot meal a day. We provided the examination support material, like past questions, chief examiner's report, the teachers, extra money for the teachers to provide tutorials and extra classes for those who are falling apart. All because if Ghana wants to grow economically, if Ghana wants to grow socially, then they have to take education strong. That is the shortest distance between prosperity and poverty.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And so, Matthew, we're clearly in an unprecedented crisis, as we've talked about. And ministers like yourself have to appreciate what's come thus far, but are looking at a landscape that I don't think anybody predicted. And as it relates to education, we've seen, you talked about learning loss and the long-term decline of learning outcomes in Ghana for a period of time. And now we've had this sudden disruption of learning. So in the time that we have left, perhaps you could focus us on how you think Ghana will navigate this current crisis, and then perhaps broaden out, because of your experience both in Ghana and at the Harvard Ministerial Program and others, you have opportunity to engage with ministers. So I think you have a pretty good perspective on how ministers are thinking about this in general. So what advice do you have for leaders trying to work through this crisis, and perhaps begin that with what your plans are for Ghana?
Thank you. The COVID crisis is one that makes the adage very true. Success comes to the prepared. And you prepare yourself through training, through capacity building, through experience sharing and everything. For me, COVID came as a shocker. But probably I was prepared because of what I've said previously, and the fact that I had a training as an epidemiologist as well. So I understood the problem from day one. So the first announcement that His Excellency the President made after putting together the National Task Force of COVID experts and ministries that were directly, hugely going to be impacted, like education, together. And we have been the Presidential Task Force. I'm a member of the Presidential Task Force since day one. We saw the gravity of the problem. The President provided exemplary leadership. He understood exactly what needed to be done, even though the decisions were going to be difficult. And even that, we have gone through hell. His first announcement in the middle of March, precisely 15th of March, was the fact that he has closed schools down, and that he was charging me to roll out distance and remote education so that children, even if they lose bit, don't lose out completely. This was a new territory in the public education system. But hey, 2 months earlier, we had gone on a conference in London, Education World Forum. And one of the deals that I had brought back to Ghana was Open University for two reasons. It had the opportunity to bring many more people around tertiary education. And two, that was the way we should be thinking of going to improve on access. And three, Open University UK had been around for a very long time and could transfer the knowledge of quality in open education. Mobile online platform open education, one of the biggest issues was quality. How do you ensure that is even the person you say you are training who is being trained? What do you do about certification? So we are taking those decisions in January. We had come back up to Ghana. We had sent a cabinet memo to cabinet. Cabinet had approved. So when COVID hit, I remember the president calling me and saying, what are you doing about this distance education? Look, you have to extend it. So we put together a team again in the ministry. In this ministry, since my tenure, we have enjoyed few Saturdays and Sundays without coming to work. Few. So we put back together a team. When the whole nation had been locked down, we had been given security passes to come to work. So we worked, and together with the support of the donor partners, DFID, USAID, who had been around for some time. DFID was into out-of-school education children. UNICEF was doing washing facilities, water, sanitation, facilities for schools. USAID was in early grade education. So we put them together. And we said, look, we need to roll out distance education. This is not the time of ifs and buts. What do we do? So we started with Ghana Learning TV. The TV Ghana Broadcasting Company gave us a full channel for free. He gave us a studio to record for free. Plan International, who are taking over some studios that Vaki had left, also gave us 5 studios for recording. So we put all the best teachers to record the new curricula that we had rolled out the year before and bring out the lesson plans, where we are periodically improving. So we started with the early grades, and now we are going to the upper primaries. We then rolled out the learning radio program because we felt that TV penetrated only about 70% of the landscape. So we brought out the radio program, supported by these same donors, COVID emergency response that the world had given. So we rolled out a radio program that we intend rolling out to affect all classes. But these programs were in the core areas, the fundamental learning areas, reading, writing, arithmetic, creativity. Those were the areas that we are recording. So we are doing that for school. We are giving them supplementary readers to assist even parents at home to take their children through the learning radio and TV program. For the secondary schools, we had a whole gamut of things. We established with the telecom companies and even for the tertiary systems to zero-rate material. And the two biggest mobile telecommunication companies freely rolled zero-rated all educational materials so that the students can have access without paying for data. Because data is the biggest single thing that we have to deal with going forward in this country. So they did it for us for free. So we are able to roll out all the core courses, that is integrated science, social studies, English and math, freely available to all secondary school students. And at home, if they got onto the iCampus platform, they had it also for free. We have put in more elective subjects. We have done virtual laboratories on for them. We have even put assessment on where their teachers can still follow how they are doing from home. So we put it together and we are improving it. Through the COVID emergency funds, we are bringing in a learning management system and putting on the teachers platform so that the teachers can also get involved. We had just made sure in our new teacher reform, ICT was not only being used as a tool, was a subject, so that the teachers will come out of their training programs all ICT friendly, because some of the students were better than the teachers, and some of the teachers didn't have the tools. So we are giving teachers the tools, we are putting the courses there, we are using our continuous professional development bit to try and bring the in-service teachers to speed through their professional learning communities and their continuous professional development programs, bringing them to speed as well. We are also embedded in the new curriculum, programming, coding, and ICT generally, so that the kids are being formally trained and they even can earn microcredits along the line. So COVID affected education dramatically, but we have responded, and we hope that with the support of cabinet and finance, we can be more resilient. Because going forward, what we have learned is that we have to have a blended education throughout. Technology must play a role because of access and a lot of issues. From June, the president started a phased opening of our educational establishment because we were getting better handle over the virus. So what then also it meant that the schools had to be, students going to the schools had to be distantly placed, they had to have masks, they had to have sanitizers and everything, water and everything. So that comprehensively, we took care of that through both the public and private tertiary and secondary institutions. Thank God, because of that, the academic year has successfully ended for most of the tertiary institutions in the country. The final year secondary school students have been able to have their international exams. The final year junior high students have been able to have the national exam that puts them in secondary school. So we've been happy about that. The children, no child was left out because of COVID. No child has been affected and couldn't write the exams because of that. That meant that we had to educate our teachers on the dangers and what to do when the children come to school. Next month, early next month, we are opening the school up again for the second year students in secondary and the second-year students in junior high school, because we have to still observe how the virus is behaving. We've had our virus numbers down dramatically in the few hundred. We hope that in the next 3 months, we will be able to eliminate the virus or come to grips with it such that we can fully reopen schools for next academic year, which we have determined that is going to be in the 2021, is to start in January next year. What we have not been able to do is to do face-to-face for really KG to primary 6, or KG to junior high school 1. And that is because of our own circumstance. In this country, the elderly kids look after the younger kids when going to school. Most of our kids will walk to school. That is one. Most of the kids are looked after by their grandparents at home, where their mothers and fathers have gone. They are in the countryside for most of it. The very young who study through play, the curriculum is about play, KG to primary 3. They sit in groups around tables. How do we exercise social distancing among kids? Are these kids, or will these kids be able to put on face masks for the duration of school? How long is the school hour going to be for these kids? Okay, we do know that these kids tolerate the virus better up to the age of 12 years. But there have been dramatic incidents amongst them as well, among kids. 2-month-old children have died of COVID. Would we be able to tolerate in the country issues of COVID affecting very, very young kids in school? And these kids do so, they harbor the virus. They still harbor. They transmit the virus just as the elderly people transmit. Will these kids then take the virus from school to their grandparents, upon who the effects are dramatic? So we've thought through it, and we said, yes, let's continue with our Ghana Learning TV, our Ghana Learning Radio, our zero-rated educational programs, and let's accept the fact that, yes, there's going to be some learning loss. And in January, if you have gotten over the COVID better, let's put in place mechanisms to catch up going forward. And bringing back programs that girl child will come back to school, vulnerable children will come back to school, start those programs now. It's going to make something like the Luminous more important. We are going to invite you to come because we know that we are going to have problems down the line. We are not running away from that. We are going to deal with the problem squarely. But in COVID, life matters more than livelihoods. Because you have to save their lives and protect their livelihoods. But the lives first. And we hope that His Excellency has led dramatically in this, shown exemplary leadership, that we may come out very soon to start back all over again. And we are prepared for that.
So thank you, Matthew. We've run out of time, but I do have 2 questions for you, if you don't mind. The first one is just to crystallize this brilliant experience and journey that you've taken us through. What lessons or advice do you have for your peers, ministers of education working through this crisis? And then to close us off, tell us, let's go back to your childhood. You mentioned a number of books that you read, but perhaps pick 1 or 2 that you feel really inspired your desire for lifelong learning and just exploration through reading.
Okay, I'll only advice is easy to give, really, but this is one of the crises that we have to collaborate more. We have to share knowledge more. And the Harvard Ministerial Leadership Program and Kennedy School of Government has been trying to do that. And other partners have been trying to engage us via Zoom on how to manage the crisis, how to do our budgeting, and what to do. Countries are learning from each other. And the more we get together as educational ministers, the more we can share our experiences and we can learn from each other, and we can provide a better service to the population out there that so much deserves better leadership. So that is the short and long I can say. in all my readings, there is the Bible stories that have stuck with me, because there are lots of Bible stories with a lot of life learning examples, with a lot of value system addition, so I don't know which one to pick. There are some Bible teachings that have stayed with me. Like, I was young and I'm old, but I've never seen the righteous forsaken nor his seed begging for bread. It's such a pillar in my life, in the sense that the more I do good, the more I render service, the more I try to help people to stand up, the better it is for me. That is where my contentedness and my happiness come from. Putting smiles on people's face and the public service that I render. And that is purely biblical for me. That I must aspire to something, and my inspiration is around the Bible. The ability to give. And when we say give not only money, give your time to the child who cannot have the opportunity you have. Give your dress to somebody who doesn't have it. Help a child to learn. Help a fellow to go through the hardships. And I think that is what made me get into medicine in the first place, that I was going to work for humanity. And that just brought me politics in the second place, because I can help many more people with good leadership. So that has been my driver, my book of Bible stories. I never forget them, and I still do go through them.
That's wonderful. Matthew, you've been a fantastic guest. We really thank you for your time and engagement with us. Any parting words or encouragement for our listeners and viewers?
In COVID times, it's very easy to give advice, but the only thing I can say is that we should be eternally prepared to learn and relearn, to skill and reskill ourselves. That, in the current 21st century, is what will keep us relevant. Your ability to adapt, because situations are so fluid and changing. I have never been on Facebook, but I think I have to learn how to get on the Facebook. I have never been able to go onto Twitter or any social media pages, but I think I have to very soon learn how to get on top of it, because that is where everybody is. So you can't get yourself out of the loop and hope that you can make an impression or an impact on people. So in all the jobs that we do, it has to be service to mankind. And you have to put yourself in the least of society and think for them, because poverty destroys the mind. Your ability to even appreciate what is good, to even speak for yourself, is destroyed by poverty. And everything we as leaders do is to lift the hand of people out of poverty into prosperity, out of lack of education into education, and out of skill into skill, so that together we can make this fantastic journey of enjoying the society better for all and experience. Thank you.
Matthew, thank you. On behalf of Luminous and the listeners, thank you for your generosity and your thoughtfulness.